So remakes is something fans have been asking for a while. But after the controversy surrounding Sword and Shield and its general lack of polish, Gen 4 fans were worried. They were frightened their beloved games would be ruined by modern day Game Freak, who've put out blunder after blunder. And when the subject of today's video, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, were announced, and Game Freak confirmed they'd be staying true to the originals, it put a lot of fans at ease. But for the other fans, that raised some different concerns. A lack of platinum content, a lack of the modernised features introduced in Gen 5 and beyond. Many predicted a disaster. And now that we finally have the game here with us, I'm going to take a look at it to see if it's truly as bad as many predicted, or if it's a solid remake worth checking out. As with all of my remake reviews, I won't be going over the story, so if you want my opinion on the Gen 4 story, give my platinum review a watch. But without further ado, let's get into it.
The reveal trailer for Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl was met with mixed reception, to put it politely. A lot of people weren't a fan of the chibi art style and compared it to the admittedly superior art style of the Link's Awakening remake, since both sported a glossy, toy-like aesthetic. Now that I finally played the game for myself and seen how it looks in action, I can say the graphics aren't as bad as I initially thought. They were obviously improved on and look a lot better than what we saw in the reveal trailer, with better lighting and shading, as well as this cool border effect that makes the game feel like it's taking place in a dream. It's an acquired taste for sure, but I personally don't mind it too much. It kind of helps accentuate the nostalgic vibe of areas like Twin Leaf and the isolated mystery of places like Eterna Forest, so it can definitely be appreciated, but it doesn't really stop the presentation from being a bit lackluster at times. There were many points in the game where I was pulled out of the experience thanks to the presentation, especially during the gym battles. In trying to preserve the charm of the originals, they decided to keep the original proportions for characters, and while it can be charming at times, there are other times where it can look tacky, such as during gym battles when the portrait transitions are featured. You go from the chibi style to more full-scale style and it really doesn't translate all that well. The contrast can be jarring, and while I can appreciate both styles, it doesn't make these moments any easier on the eyes. Another instance where the preservation of the old style bites a game in the ass is when something serious is happening on screen. Most serious and dire moments are greatly undermined by the art style. I can't take a Team Galactic member's threat seriously when they look like a fucking butt plug. Now granted, the style present is just a 3D representation of what we had in the original 2D versions, which is all fine and good, but the style worked better in 2D. Having close-ups of angry little Cyrus doesn't intimidate me the same way as old Sprite did. But moving on from the graphics, let's talk about the sound. The soundtrack is pretty decent, if a little underwhelming. Something I've realised over the years while playing remakes of old beloved games is that sometimes compositions are better left untouched. Oftentimes soundtracks, especially ones of very old games, are often as good as they are, or of the charm they have, because of the limitations of the hardware they were on. Take for example the originals, Diamond, Pearl and Platinum. These games had a very rustic and janky soundtrack, which fit the region surprisingly well and was charming because of the chiptune DS sound font. And largely, the plinky plonky soundtrack of those games is intact with this remake, but just slightly updated and modernised, which was initially somewhat disappointing for me, but now that I think about it, it fits well, especially with this being a one-to-one remake and all.
Yeah, you heard me right. This remake is basically one-to-one, which means the greatest fear of all Gen 4 fans actually came true. There's barely any platinum content here. No battle frontier, no expanded Pokédex. The pacing and story is basically entirely ripped from Diamond and Pearl, and it sucks.
If you're a Gen 4 fan, you'll know that Platinum is essentially the definitive Gen 4 experience, and a lot of that was thanks to the improvements it brought with it. One of the biggest being the improved pacing, not only in terms of the speed of the character, but also the speed of the story and general progression. But since Diamond and Pearl's progression is being left intact, it raises some issues. Thanks to the generally improved speed of the game, it doesn't really ruin the experience or anything, but moments like reaching Hearthome and not immediately being able to take on Fantina, and the locations of certain items not being the same as Platinum, it does lead to some frustrating moments.
However, with that being said, I don't think this game is too bad, even if they did skip out on the platinum content. And I know what some people are gonna say, yes, I know these are remakes of Diamond and Pearl, and not platinum specifically, but fuck you, look at Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Those games let Gen 2 fans have their cake and eat it too, featuring aspects from all three Gen 2 games, and then adding heaps more content on top of that. some of which featured characters and references from the Gen 3 and 4 games. So fuck you for making excuses for Ilka, because they could have easily married all 3 of the Gen 4 games to make the definitive Gen 4 experience, but they didn't, and this game is undoubtedly worse for it. Oh yeah, that reminds me, this game is developed by some studio called Ilka, and not Game Freak as Pokemon games usually are. Although apparently Junichi Masuda did supervise, and some Game Freak staff members did help on occasion. Supposedly the studios had a hand in some pretty big titles like Yakuza 0, Nier Automata, and Dragon Quest XI, which is quite surprising since I've never heard of them. Regardless, let's take a look at the little bit of new content we did get in this pair of remakes, starting with the Underground.
The Underground is something I believe slipped my mind back in my Platinum review, but if you're curious, I always thought it was one of the most fun side modes in any Pokemon game, and it makes a return here. Although this time there's a twist. Instead of the secret bases being purely aesthetic, they now serve a function, with you being able to place these Pokemon statues you'll find while mining in them, which raises the likelihood of the corresponding type of Pokemon appearing in these new areas underground, which sometimes feature rare Pokemon that are hard to find in the overworld. If you ask me, it's a nice fresh take on the Underground. It doesn't really overcomplicate things, leading to a simple and enjoyable side mode. The game also features plenty of quality of life improvements too, my favourite being the improved HM system. Instead of having to waste your move slots on all the HMs, you could just use your Pokédex to summon a wild Pokemon to do your bidding, once you have the right badge and find the TM containing said move. It really takes the monotony out of exploring Sinnoh, which is great. It doesn't solve any of the region's fundamental flaws, but honestly, it doesn't need to. This is more than enough to make the game a great experience. Another cool addition is Pokemon following you around outside of Amity Square. It can be a little clunky at times, but overall it's just as charming and fun as it was back in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, so I'm pretty happy with it.
There are more quality of life features, but I don't want this video to drag on too long with me listing all of them, and I'm sure you guys are curious as to what my overall feelings towards this game are. Well, despite the mixed feelings I have towards this game, overall I'd say this game was a good experience. It's probably the most fun I've had with a Pokemon game since I reviewed Black 2, which is saying something. The charm of the original shines through here, and while some of it was lost in the transition to 3D, thanks to the faithfulness with which Ilka remade this game, I still had a good time. But with that being said, would I recommend these games? If you've never played a Gen 4 game before, yes, definitely, but if you've already played or owned Platinum, no, probably not. I think these games sit on the same level as Platinum. So if you're more of a fan of what that game looks like and more of a fan of what that game brought to the table, maybe just emulate Platinum. These games are definitely good entries for the franchise, but I'm not entirely sure if they're worth the price tag. If you must buy them, maybe just wait for a sale or something, because they're good, but they're not $60 good.